So I've invited Fran and Irene up here for, I didn't know the right words for it, but Fran knew, a talking sermon.
You always talk.
We always talk, yeah. But the thought that occurred to me preparing for this was the analogy, the sameness of what we are experiencing today to what Jesus and his disciples experienced when they came into Jerusalem. And Jesus knew what was in front of him. He'd been warning the disciples for quite some time what was coming. And that night, when they had that Last Supper together, and Peter forbid the Lord to leave, that he would never, that he would defend the Lord. And this, after Jesus is crucified, after Jesus leaves, they have this feeling of, what do we do now? What do we do as disciples? Everything didn't turn out the way we thought it was. This wasn't supposed to happen. We weren't supposed to be here alone. And I know that feeling is going through all of you in some shape or form. This wasn't supposed to happen. When Fran retired and I came in, of course, being me, I had grand visions of the church growing and you all being able to buy me a private jet, that this church would do what it's doing. Then I settled back down into reality, and as we looked through all the paperwork over the years and realizing that God's plan for this church was a congregation of about 20 some odd. And then that dwindled, and then COVID came, and people moved away, we had people pass away, and it wasn't supposed to end this way. It wasn't supposed to end. And so I know you're all dealing with it. I'm dealing with that. This wasn't supposed to be how it finished. And so I just wanted to open up the floor. I know, Fran spent 25 years of her life here, and is the reason why this church was here for me to take over, for you to be here. And then Irene, when I asked her if she would be willing to consider being moderator, she had to think about it, because she's held lots of church jobs at Clearfield and know what they're like. But she did, and has a lot of wisdom. And does that resonate with you, Fran, what I've been talking about? How do you feel at this juncture?
How I feel at this juncture, I don't have any words for. But particularly when I found that little picture book and was looking back and seeing the faces and the people that have been part of this community, many I've forgotten their names and I can't remember. It was good to remember some names again. But as I said last Sunday, from the time I came up here and ended up being the pastor, which I told God that was really not a very smart thing to do. I mean, who ever heard of a pastor whose husband and kids don't go to church? But God has plans, and they didn't always coincide with mine, but I am so grateful. And when I remember the church, when I came here, yes, we had a lot of young children, and it was so fun to do the children's things and the Christmas things. And when I came here, I thought, great, Jerry can do the preaching, because I don't preach. I'm not a good preacher. I can't do that. I'll take care of the kids and I'll take care of the music, and we did. And we had some really interesting kinds of choirs for a little while, and we had wonderful children's stories, and I taught the Sunday school class, the adult Sunday school class. Of course, when Jerry left and I was it, that was something else. And so many times I You know, I thought, I just can't do this. Or I would preach a sermon and turn around and think, oh my goodness, what was that? And then, of course, that's the day that somebody would come up and say to me, thank you for that. That just touched my heart. It was the words I needed to hear, and I have for years been amazed at what happens between my mouth and your ears, and God does amazing things. But I've known that this church would be here as long as God needed us to be here. I don't know why God doesn't need us here now, but I know this is all in part of God's plan. It's hard. It's hard to not think about you being here. And I can come back and visit. But I am learning that you never stop learning. You grow. God is with you. God is not this building as much as we love it. God is not in these pews and in the sermons. God is in each one of you. And wherever you go, God will be there. And Jesus told us that. Jesus told his disciples that. You know, how are we going to get on without you? You will do even more than I did. And you will. Everywhere you are, God is. There's a song that they sing in this little Unity church that I go to. You are the face of God. I absolutely love that song. And they have pictures, and they show old men, and they show old women, and they show babies, and they show teenagers. You are the face of God. You are the power of God. You are the presence of God. You are the love of God. Wherever you are, God is. I believe that. And I do have one bone to pick with God. That it took all those years for Irene to come up and join our church, that God led her up here, but it was when I was leaving. And I thought, this is not fair. But that's okay. I knew that you would be in good hands with Fred, and I also felt comforted to know that Irene was going to be here, and he would have her to lean on, and she's always been the one I lean on. So I really appreciate it. And all the times that we would travel to the theater, and I would struggle through my sermons with you. I appreciate that. But
What are your thoughts, Irene?
I told Fran on the way up here this morning, I don't want to do this. There have been many times in my life when I said, I don't want to do this. When I was having to say goodbye to people I loved. I don't want to do this. And God says, but you can do it. And I will be with you. And God has been. And I also learned that some of my most precious memories and the most beautiful things that have happened to me have happened in those times when I said, I don't want to do this. Sometimes it takes several years to remember those things because you have to get beyond the pain of the immediate grief. But God is good. God won't leave us. God has work for us to do. God has blessings in store for each of us. I firmly believe that. Wherever we are, God is.
Amen.
Thank you, Fran and Irene. Jenny, we were looking through the slideshow for the open house, and Jenny was just expecting me to break down and sob like she had been. And I didn't. She says, "Oh, you're cold-hearted," and I said, and it stuck with me. And I thought, no, the dam's going to break pretty soon. It'll break eventually. That's the way I do things. I tend to store things up, and then the dam breaks. It's impossible for me to say how much this church meant to me. And I know I kept saying as I was preaching up here that as long as you came, I would be here. And then I started to see the signs of the risk that was involved with that, and wondered if I was being selfish by having services here and putting people's safety at risk. And it was then that I wrestled with it for months, and then I knew that the choice had to be made. That I had to bring it to you and let you decide. Yeah, if I could, I would stay here. But life has a way. The monastery, the Trappist monks in the monastery, well, there's our plan and there's God's plan. And they also had to make a difficult choice. So life is difficult choices. And as a introverted child growing up, I didn't want to have to make any choices. I wanted other people to make choices and tell me what to do. And I know that you all feel that you would come to this church, and I know you would. But I want to give you God's blessing that you are ready, that whatever I was able to contribute to you, whatever all of us were able to contribute to you, has been in preparation for this, to prepare you, to give you new spiritual awareness, new spiritual healing, new spiritual confidence, new peace. And so that's what I want to leave you with, is the peace of knowing that our time together here is precious. And that it shouldn't be discounted in any way, that it should be treasured and loved, remembered. Just like you would a treasured, remembered family membership. And so I just invite you to give thanks and be at peace. As Fran and Irene have alluded to or talked to, the ministry accomplished what it was supposed to accomplish, whatever that was. And we can walk away here with the peace of knowing that this ministry accomplished what God intended it to do. And all those young children that Fran talked about when she first came here, they're all adults with their families now. So
and I've got to baptize some of the babies and
right.
bless them. And
So the fruit has been born. The fruit has been born from this church. The seed has produced what it was supposed to produce. And we can take peace and comfort in knowing that. And so may the peace of Christ be with you.
And also with you.
Anything else that you would like to say, either of you?
well, I thought of something a minute ago, but then I forgot. It must not have been that important.
Okay. Anything, Irene? Would any of you like to say anything? If you would, raise your hand, we'll call on you. I know a lot of you got to say your piece at the celebration service, so. Yes, John?
Yeah, I came here about 20 years ago, maybe. About 20, maybe a little more, I don't know, but we had tried a whole bunch of other different options and things, but then when I got here, I could tell instantly that this church simply had a presence, a vibe, a sense of sanctity about it, that it was, I felt home.
And that's what I was going to say. This church has been a healing church through the years. Even executive ministers, not particularly Doug, but through the years, people from the region that have come here, and they would tell me there is a sense of healing in this church. There's a very special spirit about this church. And it's always been that way since I came here. And I know the church that existed in this building was born out of strife in another church that split. And it's amazing how loving and the spirit of love that was part of this church for all those years. And the church I'm going to in Fort Mojave or in Bullhead, when we walked in and when I met one of the pastors, I felt that love, the openness, the caring about all people and all creatures. And they are not what you would, they are a unity church, and they believe a little bit differently, and it's really been stretching for me sometimes, but that's okay. I like to be stretched, and I think it was just as John said, it was the love in that church that brought me there, and there's still more, and there's still more for you to be learning, there's still more growth for you to have. You'll never stop that, and you'll never stop being God's people wherever you are. I think you are the ones who made this church the healing, loving place that it is, and I thank you for that. I thank you for all the years that you supported me when I do stuff that other pastors would say, how did you get away with that? I said, they love me. So, but I thank you for that. I thank you for all that you gave to me, and I know that you gave to Fred, and I just, this church was you. And mercy.
The word permanent has just come to my mind. And we want permanence in our lives. We want things, when they're good, we want them to continue. And I'm looking out and I'm seeing these mountains, and we think they're permanent, but they're not. Eventually, they will no longer be there. And that's the way our universe is created, for change, for growth, for death, for life. There is no real permanence except in God. And I just wanted to share that because these mountains mean the world to me, just like this church does. But they won't always be there. And that's okay.
Yes, Anita?
I'd like to share Jeremiah 29:11. I, the Lord, declare, I have plans for you,
Yes.
not to do you harm, but to give you a future. Every single one of us. Whatever we're going through, He's got a plan, and it will not do us harm. It will give us a future.
Thank you.
I've leaned on that for years, thank
Yeah.
God.
Thank you, Anita.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Jean?
I have a special memory
Okay.
that it goes back 50, 60 years where Irene and Fran used to sing duets together at the Clearfield Church. And it was so special. And my husband, he would not miss when he knew they were gonna sing. He was always there, and they were so special. And I see them together now, and I think that was a really, really good times when they sang.
It was.
But they don't do it anymore.
And the funny thing is, she was the soprano and I was the alto, and we would do that. And then when I came up here, you can't very well lead music as an alto, so I had to learn the soprano. And luckily we had the black box, so I could just push a button and bring it down to where it was in my range. And as when I left the choir at Clearfield, she was more a contralto, I don't know what you call it, but anyway, she ended up, I guess they didn't have a strong alto, but she ended up with the alto. And it was often after when we would go to some of the,
Conventions.
thank you, I lose my words. Some of the conventions, and we'd be singing together. She was singing soprano and I was singing, no, it was the other way around.
Yeah.
I was singing soprano and she was singing alto. So it was just a strange thing through the years with that. But yes, I remember when we
It
would
was
come
special.
and sing here at Morgan Valley for special occasions, and loved it, just loved it. And now I just croak.
Thanks, Regina. I've heard the legends, yeah. Anyone else? All right, well, thank you, everyone. Well, I'll stop recording. Next we'll go to our communion, and I've asked Fran to help with communion, so we'll get stuff there. And I've set up the communion railings. You're welcome to come up and get communion. So at this point, we'll switch into communion.